Okay, here's a question that comes in online from Daryl, and I did not catch the town here, but Daryl has two questions actually, and we'll take one and then see if we have time for the second. But the first question is, does the scripture specifically teach that the temple will be rebuilt? Let's think about this a moment. Does the scripture specifically teach that the temple will be rebuilt? Now, we are, of course, in a day without the temple. We've been in this day since, 70 AD, when the Romans destroyed the temple. Now, let's go back, and Daryl mentions this in his in his question, that the Bible never specifically called for the construction of the temple to begin with. The Bible called for the construction of the tabernacle, and it was David then that desired to build the temple, and Solomon that actually built it. So, in all of that, the man-made structure that God allowed to be built, and he certainly did allow Solomon to build the temple, and did not give any instruction against David building the temple, when this is what David planned to do. The only thing he said, David, you yourself can't do it, but your son will build it. Build a house for my name. So God at least tacitly endorses the construction of the temple. And when the temple is dedicated, God says, this is going to be my dwelling place. I will dwell here. So, he puts his stamp of approval upon the temple, whether or not it was instructed to be built. Now, yet that man-made structure was destroyed twice. One in 586 by the Babylonians, and the second time in 70 AD by the Romans. And so the millennial temple then, which is described beginning in Exodus chapter 40, is man going to build that. I think when you read Ezekiel chapter 40, what you see is that the millennial temple in which God is going to dwell personally during the days of the millennium is not built by man. Rather, it is built and constructed by God. So, what does that bring with the Antichrist temple? And this gets into the second part of your question, which we'll look into. But in this part of the question, would Jesus actually take a seat on a throne that was built in the temple by man? Now, I think the question is, the answer to that question is maybe, and here's why I say maybe. First of all, he's going to sit on the throne of David, and the throne of David was a throne built by man, and obviously had the work of God underneath it. But David's throne was a physical kingdom, and Jesus, the Messiah, is going to inherit and restore this physical kingdom. So, I wouldn't have a problem saying that Jesus would sit in a throne made by man. Yeah, he might do so. I think when you read about the millennial temple, you see that more it is a temple made by God. Now, let me just mention the Orthodox Judaism, for example. Orthodox Jews are typically not Zionist. A Zionist is one who believes that the land of Israel today belongs to the Jewish people and has been established to them by God. And the Zionist Congress by Theodore Herzl in 1898 was the modern movement that brought about the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. And the Orthodox Jews were not on board with that Zionism or with the establishment of Israel, nor are they on board with the reconstruction of the temple. This is the Hasidic Jews all the way over on the right side. They're not into that. And their reasoning is God will build it. It will be a work of God. And they've got some, I think, logical understanding from the text of the scripture on why that is to be. But most Jews today are Zionists. Not only that, but they want to see the rebuilding of the temple. And Christians today believe that the temple is going to be rebuilt physically by the Jews. I happen to be one that believes that. Now, I think the rebuilding of the temple, which could take place in our day, will be done by the Jews. It'll be, real gold, real marble, real wood, and real cash that takes care of it. But will that be the millennial temple? That's where I think not so. I think the third temple is actually going to be destroyed again, maybe by the Lord the day of the second coming. And the millennial temple then will be established. So, does the scripture specifically teach that the temple will be rebuilt? I think that it shows there's a need for a rebuilt temple for the Antichrist, and that it's going to be rebuilt by human hands. I think you just have to separate that from the millennial temple. So, great question there. And I appreciate that. Let's see, make sure we get, again, all of our questions coming through. And we have... Andy mentions the book of Ezekiel is a good place to read about this, Ezekiel chapter 40. Exactly. Okay, let's then move into the second part of Daryl's question earlier. And again, pardon me for not getting Daryl's down here. But the first question was, does the scripture specifically teach that the temple will be rebuilt?